Most people think visualization means closing your eyes and imagining something good happening to them. A wish? A daydream? A moment of hope before reality pulls them back. That's not visualization. That's escape. There is a different kind of mental operation. One that has nothing to do with positive thinking and everything to do with precision. It doesn't comfort you. It constructs something. It runs a complete simulation inside the mind with such accuracy that when the physical world finally catches up, it's just confirming what was already finished somewhere else. The difference between these two mental states determines more about your life than your talent, your circumstances, or your effort ever will. And the man who understood this with more clarity than almost anyone who has ever lived was Nikola Tesla. In 1882, a 26-year-old Serbian engineer was walking through a park in Budapest when something stopped him mid-step. He wasn't holding blueprints. He wasn't at a workbench. He was reciting Goethe from memory when the solution to a problem that had consumed him for months appeared, fully formed, inside his mind. Not a sketch, not a concept, a complete functioning machine. He could see the motor rotating. He could observe the electromagnetic field shifting. He watched it operate in real time, inside his own head, with the same clarity he would later use to describe it to engineers who would actually build it. That machine was the alternating current motor, the technology that would eventually power the modern world. Tesla didn't go home and draw it immediately. He spent the next several months running it mentally, testing it, stress testing it, identifying weaknesses, before a single physical component was ever assembled. When he finally built it, it worked. Not because he was lucky, because in his mind, it had already been working for months. This wasn't an accident of genius. It was a method. Tesla documented it himself in My Inventions, his 1919 autobiography, describing how he developed the ability to construct devices entirely in his imagination, visualizing them with such precision that he could identify flaws, make adjustments, and observe results without ever touching physical material. He called it his mental laboratory. Tesla didn't see what had already happened. He saw what hadn't happened yet, with enough precision that the future became inevitable. Think about where your mind goes when it's not occupied. Not when you're focused, not when you're working. When you're in the shower, driving alone, lying in the dark before sleep comes. Where does your mind go? For most people, the honest answer is backward, to the conversation that went wrong, to the decision that still cost them something, to the version of themselves they were 5 years ago, running the same argument, the same regret, the same moment on a loop. The brain replays what it knows. It defaults to what's familiar. And the more it replays, the more it reinforces the neural architecture of a past that no longer exists, but starts to feel more real than any future you're trying to build. This is not a moral failure. It's a mechanical one. The mind goes where it has been trained to go. And most people have never been taught to train it forward. The result is a life that feels like it's moving, because you're busy, because time is passing, but is actually circling. The same patterns, the same ceilings, the same internal landscape, dressed in different years. The question isn't whether you're capable of something more. The question is whether the version of the future you want has enough precision inside your mind to compete with the gravitational pull of everything you've already lived. This is what visualization actually is, and it is not what most people practice. Visualization, properly understood, is not the passive imagining of a desired outcome. It is the deliberate, disciplined construction of a mental reality with enough detail, enough sensory specificity, and enough structural integrity that the brain begins to treat it as reference, not fantasy. The neuroscience supports this with precision. Mental rehearsal activates the same motor cortices as physical execution. The brain, at the level of its firing patterns, does not cleanly distinguish between vividly imagined experience and lived experience. What you practice mentally, you reinforce neurologically. This is not metaphor. It is documented function. Here is how the mechanism works. The brain is a pattern recognition and prediction machine. It is constantly building models of what is likely to happen based on what has happened before. When you repeatedly and vividly construct a specific future state, with sensory detail, with emotional texture, with structural coherence, you are feeding that predictive system a new data point. You are, in effect, creating a memory of something that hasn't happened yet. And the brain navigates toward what it recognizes. This is why vague aspiration produces vague results. I want to be successful gives the brain nothing to navigate toward, but a precise mental construction. Specific environment, specific feeling, specific action creates a target the brain's predictive architecture can actually orient to. The difference between a daydream and a mental laboratory is resolution. One is blurry, the other is engineered. Tesla didn't visualize outcomes. He visualized processes. He didn't see himself celebrated. He saw the machine operating, field by field, rotation by rotation. He documented that he would build an invention mentally, run it for weeks, and observe where it failed before ever manufacturing a single part. He described being able to detect stress fractures in imagined components simply by observing how the mental model behaved under simulated load. This is not poetic license. This is what he wrote. His mental laboratory wasn't a place of hope. It was a place of work. The same discipline he brought to a physical bench, he brought to the space behind his eyes. The future he was building existed in full resolution inside his mind long before it existed anywhere else. But there was a period when Tesla's mental laboratory turned against him. In the 1890s, following a complete physical and nervous breakdown, documented in his own writings and in contemporaneous accounts, Tesla lost access to the very faculty he had built his entire method around. He described periods of extreme sensory disturbance, an inability to concentrate, and a frightening deterioration of the precise mental imagery that had defined his work. The laboratory in his mind went dark. He did not immediately recover. He did not push through with discipline. He withdrew. He rested, reluctantly, against every instinct of a man whose identity was built entirely on mental output. For months, he operated at a fraction of his capacity, rebuilding the internal architecture piece by piece. What he returned to was not optimism. It was the method. The same systematic, precise, patient construction of mental imagery, starting small, rebuilding resolution gradually, treating the mind the way an engineer treats a damaged instrument, with diagnostic patience, not force. He came back to the process, not to inspiration, not to motivation, to the method. But this wasn't limited to one moment in Tesla's life. The same principle showed up again, in a completely different context. And the pattern it reveals is impossible to ignore. By 1901, Tesla had already changed the world once. The alternating current system was operational. His name was tied to one of the most consequential technological shifts in human history. And he was already inside the next thing. In his mind, he had been inside it for years. The Wardenclyffe Tower project, Tesla's attempt to build a global system for wireless transmission of energy and communication, wasn't a new idea born from his existing success. It was a vision he had been constructing mentally for over a decade. He had seen it. He had run it. He had observed, in his mental laboratory, a planet connected by invisible current. Information and energy transmitted through the Earth itself, accessible to anyone, anywhere. The technology to physically realize that vision did not yet exist. The funding infrastructure did not exist. The public understanding did not exist. None of that interrupted the precision of what he could see. He pursued Wardenclyffe with the same methodical commitment he had brought to the AC motor. Not because the external conditions supported it, but because the internal construction was already complete. In his mind, it was already built. The physical world simply hadn't caught up. It didn't, in his lifetime. Wardenclyffe was never finished. Funding collapsed. The tower was demolished in 1917. Tesla spent the final decades of his life without the resources, the recognition, or the infrastructure to complete what he had seen so clearly. And here is what that reveals. The same principle that produced one of the most successful technological achievements of the 19th century also produced one of the most documented failures of the 20th. Tesla did not selectively apply his mental method to safe targets. He applied it to everything his mind could construct with precision, regardless of whether the external world was ready to receive it. This is the full picture of what visualization actually demands. It is not a technique for guaranteed outcomes. It is a commitment to operating from a future that doesn't yet exist, and accepting that the gap between what you can see and what the world can currently hold is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that you are early. Tesla never stopped seeing Wardenclyffe as finished. He never revised the internal construction to match the external failure. To the end of his life, he maintained that the system would eventually be built by someone, somewhere, because the logic of it was sound. He was right. The principles underlying Wardenclyffe are foundational to modern wireless technology. He just couldn't live long enough for the world to confirm what he had already seen. The pattern across both moments is unmistakable. Tesla did not visualize what was possible. He visualized what was true, and then waited, worked, and refused to collapse the internal image just because the external timeline hadn't arrived yet. Now that you understand what this principle is, how Tesla lived it, and why it showed up in every chapter of his life, the real question is what you do with it starting today. Audit where your mind goes when it's unoccupied. For one full day, notice, without judgment, whether your default mental state is oriented toward the past or toward the future. Not what you wish were true. What is actually happening inside your mind when nothing is demanding your attention? You cannot redirect a pattern you haven't observed. This is the diagnostic before the method. Build one mental construction with precision. Not a vision board, not a general aspiration, but a specific scene. Where are you? What does the environment look like? What are you doing specifically? What does it feel like in the body? Run it for 5 minutes, every morning, before you interact with any external input. The goal is not to feel good. The goal is resolution. The more specific the construction, the more navigable the target. When the external world fails to confirm what you're seeing internally, and it will, do not revise the image to match the failure. Revise the timeline. Tesla's internal construction of Wardenclyffe was never wrong. The external conditions simply required more time than he had. The discipline is to hold the precision of the vision while remaining patient and adaptive about the path. This is not delusion. It is the fundamental commitment that separates people who build new things from people who only adapt to existing ones. If you want to go deeper into everything we covered today, one book changed the way I understand visualization completely. My Inventions by Nikola Tesla. It's short, it's precise, and it's the only place you can read, in Tesla's own words, exactly how his mental laboratory worked. I'll leave the link in the description. The mind will always replay what it knows, unless you give it something more precise to move toward. Tesla didn't wait for the world to show him what was possible. He built it internally first, with the patience of someone who understood that the future doesn't arrive on the world's timeline. It arrives on the timeline of whoever was willing to see it clearly enough and hold that image long enough for reality to have no choice but to catch up. The question is not whether you're capable of seeing your future. The question is whether what you're seeing has enough resolution to compete with everything you've already lived. If this is the kind of content that makes you think differently, subscribe and hit the like button. It's the simplest way to help this channel grow and reach people who need to hear this. What future are you currently building inside your mind? And does it have enough precision to actually pull you forward? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next one.